Welcome to Beyond the Coverage. I'm Chris Horner. We're one day away from the 25 Vuelta a España starting proper. That's tomorrow. Tomorrow starts stage one of the Vuelta a España, and it looks like it should be a sprinter stage. So that one's not so difficult or complicated to look at if you're one of the GC teams of UAE Team Emirates or Visma-Lease bike. No one's going to argue with me that these are the two strongest teams in the world and the strongest team starting the Tour of Spain on Saturday. So if stage one is not that important for these two teams, it will be very important for Alpecin de Koenig, could be very important for Lidl Trek's Mads Pedersen, and of course post-Picnic NL, when we start looking over there with Casper van Oelden. Remember, he won a stage at the Giro, so we know those three teams will probably control stage one, which means what? Means the big time two favorites here, Visma-Lease bike, UAE Team Emirates, get to take one a little bit more relaxed, at least relaxed in terms of controlling tactically the race, until we start getting into stage two. After stage two, things get a little bit complicated. If I take you into Jonas Vingegaard's interview before the Vuelta a España started, he says that he is expecting to win. He didn't use the word expecting, but nothing less than winning is what Jonas Vingegaard wants out of this year's Vuelta a España, and he knows he's the hot favorite, so you know he's expecting to win. Okay, now we look into Visma-Lease bike and we look at their team. We know Jorgenson is a player, there's no doubt about that. He's won Paris-Nice 2 times, he's gone top 10 in the Tour de France, but we look at the 25 Tour de France. Jorgenson went a little flat in the last mountain stages of the third week of the Tour de France and started dropping off the pace. Dropped out of the top 10 overall classification at the 25 Tour de France, but that you could easily put down to Visma-Lease bike racing too aggressively from stage one throughout the 25 Tour de France. So we come in the Vuelta a España, and again, Jonas, Jorgenson, Sepp Kuss is on the team, my man Victor Campenaerts, Ben Tulit's climbing pretty decent up there, and they got Wilco Kelderman. That's 6 climbers. We start looking over at UAE Team Emirates, and they don't quite have 6 climbers unless everybody's going to up their game to the best we've seen in the last few years. What they do have is Almeida and Juan Ayuso. But we look over at Visma-Lease bike Jorgenson. Jorgenson, on his best form, can compete against Almeida and Juan Ayuso too. So they're almost 2 for 2. Maybe, when we look over UAE Team Emirates, Almeida might have a little bit more over Jorgenson, at least in the 25 season, because of the 3 victories at the Basque Country, Romandy, and of course Tour of Suisse, where he won 3 stages in the general classification, plus was going exceptionally well at the first week of the Tour de France, but Jorgenson was too. Jorgenson went exceptionally well at the first week of the Tour de France, and it was only again because I think Visma-Lease bike over-raced too hard in the first week and second week of the Tour de France that we saw his form drop off. But on paper, you could say Jorgenson is every bit the same kind of quality rider as Almeida is and Juan Ayuso. So Visma-Lease bike start going 2 for 2. You go down to the third riders and you look at Sepp Kuss and you go, well, Sepp Kuss won the 23 Vuelta a España. But we all know the American rider has been sick and had some problems throughout the last 2 seasons, but we saw him going better at this year's 25 Tour de France, where we saw him splitting the peloton up to pieces and drilling in at the front for his team leader, Jonas Vingegaard, to try to drop Tadej Pogačar, which never happened, but we know Sepp Kuss' form has at least come up. We did see at the 25 Tour de France where Sepp Kuss was kind of yo-yoing a little bit with the form now. One stage he could be fantastic, another stage not so fantastic. So we don't know exactly where his form's going to be here at the Vuelta a España. But when we start looking over UAE Team Emirates at Jay Vine crashed out of the Giro d'Italia and has not gone so spectacularly well throughout the rest of the season before he starts the Tour of Spain. So Sepp Kuss, I would say at this moment, has a little bit of nudge over the rider of Jay Vine. You start looking a little bit further down, you start talking Domen Novak. I can remember at times when Domen Novak was climbing exceptionally well last season, but we have not seen that depth of climbing from Domen Novak that we saw at points and times throughout the 24 season. So we start comparing him over to my man Victor Campenaerts, who was climbing at the Tour de France with only about 15 riders left in the front group. But my man Victor Campenaerts has all of a sudden turned himself from a classic rider getting dropped at the stage races into the mountain stages when there's still 40, 50, 60 riders left. So now all of a sudden Victor Campenaerts climbing when there's 15 riders left in the front group. And I can tell you just by eyesight that Victor Campenaerts, my man, has gotten thin, and he is a climber now. So you got to take some regard over there at Visma-Lease bike that Victor Campenaerts can do some climbing. Now, why am I comparing up all these riders? I'm comparing them up because at the Tour of Spain that starts on Saturday, once we get into stage 2, yes, it's a summit finish, but it's a soft summit finish at about 5.5% climb to the top, which means what? It means when the climbs gets a little bit softer, there's going to be more attacks and the draft is better. So Visma-Lease bike have to be very careful how they use their energy throughout the stages. And when we start looking at the Tour of Spain, we know that you got to go all the way into stage 7 to see a climb of any real depth where we start talking about some 9% sections. Once we start talking 9% sections, what does that mean? That means if Jonas Vingegaard is on very good form, 9% does not leave the rider sitting on the wheel of Jonas Vingegaard with much of a draft. So once we get into stage 7, that stage starts looking more precisely like a stage that Jonas Vingegaard can solo on if he has his top form. If he has his top form, he can solo on 6% climbs too. There's no doubt about it. But we have not seen his top form since the 24 season. So we start looking a little bit tactically there at Visma-Lease bike. And what you don't want to happen, and we know from the interviews that Jonas Vingegaard is their race leader, but what you don't want to happen is for Visma-Lease bike to start going, well, we have Jorgenson in that front group. Because if we start looking a little bit deeper past the first week and we start going into the Bilbao stage, guys, this stage is basically Tour of Basque Country. And I'm familiar with the Tour of Basque Country because I won the Tour of Basque Country. And these climbs are incredibly thick and steep. And so when you go up over a real hard climb and then you drop down and you have a valley, what happens in the valley? If the selection happens over a short, steep climb, that usually means that you're going to still have 20, 30, possibly even 40 guys in the peloton of GC favorites, but it also means that if you've been riding the front, so if it's my man Victor Campenaerts been riding the front, we're halfway in the middle of the stage and he's been drilling it on the front through the flat sections. When you're drilling on the flat sections, you're using a ton of energy more than the rider behind that's on your wheel, which means what? It means when you get in the next climb, you're not so fresh versus the rider behind you through that valley and down the descents, means he's been relaxing and resting his legs a bit. So a rider like Victor Campenaerts that I just told you could ride top 15 at the 25 Tour de France. If he has to ride a couple valleys and they're 10 kilometers long plus a 5-kilometer descent added in there, now we're talking 15 kilometers on the front, plus he rode the climb before and the valley before that. He could be on the front for 35K and you hit that next short, steep climb there when we're talking the Bilbao stage. All of a sudden you can't follow going up the next climbs, which means what? It means Visma-Lease bike starts losing riders. UAE Team Emirates, if all of their riders come in to the Tour of Spain here on good form, Domen Novak's riding good, Soler's riding good. We start looking over at Jay Vine. He's on good form. I don't know if he will be, but possibly he could be. We'll have to see. But we start looking at where UAE Team Emirates could have some more numbers over Visma-Lease bike. When you get in the valleys and on the descents, they can start playing some tactical games. If Visma-Lease bike are down to one rider or possibly two riders on the front of the peloton, they might not be able to protect Jonas so well through the valley. Now, we know Visma-Lease bike got some depth. So if all the riders are riding strong, then you know you can protect Jonas Vingegaard. But if they start getting a little tactical craziness going on, a little knuckleheadism over there, Visma-Lease bike, and let's say we go into that Bilbao stage again and we go into the first climb on that stage, they send Jorgenson up the road. Attacks start happening. We know there's going to be tons of attacks, and a break goes up the road. Let's say it's 40 guys. That's not hard to see. We've seen 40-man breaks all over the place. You only have to go into the Tour de France to see it. Or if I take you back into the 23 Vuelta a España, stage 6, Sepp Kuss goes up the road in what? 35-40 rider break up the road not Visma-Lease bike, but Pseudo Quickstep allowed to go up the road. Now, why do I bring it up? Jumbo-Visma then, now Visma-Lease bike now. Jumbo-Visma allowed Sepp Kuss to go up in that front group of 35-40 riders, and they played Sepp Kuss card. So will we see a Sepp Kuss type card played on one of these earlier second week stage here of the Tour of Spain? It's quite possible, and we go back in and use that Bilbao stage again as an example. Let's say big break goes up the road in your Visma-Lease bike and you got Jorgenson in there. Now you have to be careful, very, very careful if you're going to play this card, Because if I take you into stage 6 of the 23 Vuelta a España, that card worked because why? Because Sepp Kuss had teammates. Remember, one rider cannot control a group of 4 maybe, not a group of 5, not a group of 10, certainly not a group of 15, and certainly not a group of 40. So Visma-Lease bike have to be very careful. If they allow Jorgenson a chance at trying to win the Tour of Spain in 2025, we've seen interviews already released this morning where Jorgenson says that he knows his teammates, that his team that he's signed for, Visma-Lease bike, knows that he would like to be a Grand Tour challenger. So possibly they play that card of letting Jorgenson go up the road. But you have to be careful. If Jorgenson is allowed to go up the road, he has to be either in a very small group of breakaway riders, or if he's in a big group, you have to have what? You have to have teammates like Sepp Kuss had. Sepp Kuss had at least 2 teammates with him in that group of 35-40. And those 2 teammates could easily corral the front of that group and control everything into the final climb, where Sepp Kuss was able to do what? Work his climbing legs magic and win the 23 Vuelta a España. So you cannot allow, if you're sitting on the Chesterfield or you're driving the car back there for Visma-Lease bike especially, you cannot see that you have one Visma-Lease bike rider in there. If it's a big size group, they have to have at least 2, if not 3 up there so that they can control the group better. And then Jorgenson would be allowed to go up in that group, and Jonas Vingegaard can sit back there as long as he has Almeida and Juan Ayuso with him, or at least one or the other rider with him. Then Jorgenson could be allowed to go up there and possibly win himself a Grand Tour. Maybe he has some company like a Sepp Kuss, and maybe Sepp Kuss has some form too. Who knows? But those are the things you got to be careful of. Now, in terms of Visma-Lease bike, if you can get through the first 12 stages, it's stage 13. That's really, absolutely, 100%, no doubt about it, is ideal for Jonas Vingegaard to put a stamp on the 25 Vuelta a España if he has good form, because it's the Angliru stage. Now, what makes this stage 13 so special, besides, of course, the obvious, that they're going up to Angliru, we're talking about 24% sections all the way up to the top. It's a magical climb, guys. It is so hard that when I won the Vuelta a España in 2013 and it was the final climb that year, when I got to the top, I thought, okay, I never have to do this climb again, because it's not going to get any better than today. So hopefully I never see this climb again, unless I'm coming up here on a training ride for historical reasons in the future. Otherwise, that climb was so steep, I thought I never needed to see it again. But it is appearing here on stage 13 of the 25 Tour of Spain. And we know at this moment, when we're talking about 19 to 24% sections, that there's not much of a draft, which means it gets a little bit easier for a pure climber, the best rider in the Tour of Spain. If he has the best legs, you can solo a climb like the Angliru. There's no doubt about that. So Jonas and Visma-Lease bike, the #1 objective when I'm looking through all the first 12 stages, I'm thinking of what? Visma-Lease bike need to get through the team time trial. There's no doubt about that, and not lose time to UAE team members or any other threats back there. But we want to ride through those stages and see exactly where Jonas's form is. If it's exceptionally good, you can start dropping riders right away on stage 2, but you don't want to get carried away. It looks better if you go into the team time trial. You start riding then, you let stage 2, whoever you want can win stage 2, assuming they're not a big threat on the general classification. You don't want Ayuso gaining time. You do not want Almeida gaining time. There's no doubt about that. But any other rider on the general classification, if they were to win the stage and grab some time bonuses against Jonas, that's not a big deal. Go into the team time trial on stage 5. Try to win that, gain some time back. Hopefully don't put yourself in the race leader's red jersey if you don't have the full strength of the team. Now, if you got serious power numbers back there and you know everyone's riding fantastic, again, you can take it on stage 2 and just hold it throughout every stage here of the 25 Vuelta. But otherwise, you go into stage 7 thinking this is a good stage here for Jonas, and certainly stage 13. Now, one other thing about stage 13, besides the Angliru, which I forgot to mention before, is that it's a 204-kilometer stage. The last 5 editions, this stage has always been pretty short. Back in 2013, we're talking about 85, 90-mile stage. It was a short stage when I won in 2013, and it has been short for the last 5 editions. You'd have to go back to Alberto Contador in 2008 when he won, where it was over 200 kilometers. Since then, what that means is that when you come into the Angliru, when I did it in 2013, I didn't calculate for it being a short stage. And whenever it's a short stage, it means what? It means everybody's legs are a little bit fresher. Now, historically speaking, normally the Angliru stage has at least 3 difficult climbs, 2 before it, and then the Angliru itself. So that can kind of tire out the legs a little bit. But when it's over 200 kilometers like it is at this year's 25 edition, that means the legs will be more tired of riders when you come into the finish there, which means what? It means if you really are head and shoulders above the rest of the peloton, it's a little bit easier to gain time on everyone. So keep that in mind when you're comparing the past 5 editions where they're all been about 80 to 90 miles or about 130, 145 kilometers long. Those shorter stages mean that there's a little bit more competition going up to Angliru, and that's what we saw in the 23 edition when Sepp Kuss won, of course, because there's 3 Visma-Lease bikes, but it was Bahrain Victorious that were drilling in on the front for Mikel Landa, and they're capable of going up the climb fast because it's a shorter stage and more riders are fresh coming into Angliru versus at over 200 kilometers. It means we could see a magnificent explosion at the bottom proper when the Angliru starts, and then we see who is the cream of the cream. In stage 13, there is no hiding. Throughout the earlier stages, maybe stage 7s, there's not much hiding on that, but every other stage you can kind of hide a little bit when they're 5 and 6% climbs, and you just have to be careful of your Visma-Lease bike not to lose the Tour of Spain with some ridiculous tactics. And if you're UAE Team Emirates, tactically, I'm thinking about how can I have Visma-Lease bike using up their whole team on every possible stage that I can get and just wait for an opportunity in that window of opportunity to open up and then attack Jonas and gain some time. Like and subscribe, guys. We don't know where anybody's form is exactly here the day before the Vuelta, but we will know soon. And once we start getting into stage 7, and certainly by stage 13, we're going to know for sure who's got legs here at the Tour of Spain. Like and subscribe. I'll see you guys for stage 1 on the Butterfly Effect.